just about to start our session, and we're going to be talking about the question of extraterritoriality, and especially digital extraterritoriality. And to this end, I'd like to welcome Raphaël Gauvin. Thank you for accepting invitation. Sorry. So you're actually you are well known because you were an MP, a French MP between 2017 and 2022. Could you maybe retrace in a few words your journey? Yes, of course. I'm a lawyer, and I've been a lawyer since 2001, now over 20 years. And I specialize in criminal contentious, defending companies with issues of corruption, fraud, cyber fraud. And therefore, I was a French MP of Burgundy, Saône-et-Loire exactly, for 5 years. And therefore, I worked on issues of terrorism and extraterritoriality and reinforcement of companies and defending the sovereignty of France. So this is it is a topic that is a connection of what the data and digital identity can be is more recent. And first, let us define the topic and how can we define extraterritoriality. And maybe you could give us a summary of the history of the last 20 years on this topic. Well, extraterritoriality, it's a state that's applying the law. Normally, the principle is that the law applies on the territory of that state. And here, extraterritoriality is the state that applies its law to the whole world. And we had an illustration, and this is where it came. The issues is the use that our American friends have done, including against us in 2 areas mainly, which are fighting against corruption and sanctions. You may remember that in the years 2010, 2014, the BNP Paribas case, where the French bank is sued by the American authorities for violating American laws in Cuba, and the bank is sanctioned for $10 billion. Another very well-known case is Alstom, which is the French company, again, that has public contracts in Asia. There is an issue of corruption, and therefore it is sued not by the local authorities, not by the French authorities, but by the American authorities in 2014. So, and then other example, it's very well known, is Iran, where the American authorities decide that the foreign companies, including European or French companies, are not allowed to work in Iran, and given heavy sanctions, which has led in 2019 to French companies, European companies faced with the fear of application of these extraterritorial laws have left Iran. And therefore, extraterritoriality is exactly that. Thank you. We have a number of question marks because when we look at the cases you've just talked about, and we can find that the links with the territory can be quoting on a stock exchange, it could be citizenship and other criteria. And since 2016, we can see that the digital issue is appearing in extraterritoriality. In 2016, there was a report by the French National Assembly just before you joined. Since then, 20 years have gone by, and we have new laws with extraterritorial reach. We have the Cloud Act, an American one, GDPR in Europe. We have a number of laws on the banking industry that has international reach. So what do these evolutions show, especially since, for the past 8 years? Sorry. What we can say about the 8 years, we had 2 reports from the French National Assembly. We had a report in 2016 that was done just after the BNP and Alstom cases. And I produced a report in 2019 on, again, the extraterritoriality with the objective of trying to have an audit of the threat, including the Cloud Act, and try and propose, implement solutions. What we can say is that what has happened for the past 6-7 years, the 2016, 2018, it's when France, and probably at European level, where we start to realize the issue and the threat of the extraterritorial application, and including this American threat against our companies. And therefore, the first reaction is defensive, both in France and in Europe. Yes, both in France and in Europe. And 2016, 2018, you have this realization, and you have the first measures implemented, especially in France, with in 2016 what we call the Sapin II law, which has allowed us on issues of fighting against corruption, because what the Americans were telling us is that they were saying, we applied the extraterritorial law because in reality you don't do your job. And if we sanction the companies because you don't do the job yourself. So we implemented this Sapin II law, allowing us to be up to the level. And since then, France has managed to find on this issue some sovereignty. Now, the major issue remains ahead of us is the issue of sanctions. And what has been happening since 2016, first, you have an increase at the American level with the Iran, and especially you have the arrival of a new player, China, who in 2019-2020 has adopted a number of laws, also with extraterritorial reach, with sanction packages. And the risk that France and Europe face is this multiplication of extraterritorial law application. 7-8 years ago was essentially from the States, and today we have a multiplication of various channels. So what happened? Well, in France, we had this reaction with the Sapin II law. I proposed that we bring up ourselves to level with the law. There was a first reform in 2022, and it's a reform that had no legislative reach. It was only by decree, reorganizing the services, especially the French Ministry of Finance, for a better application of this blocking law. So it is being said that in June, or maybe a Macron II law, with more provisions to go further in reforming this blocking law, which I think is significant. This blocking law, what does it do? Well, the principle of this blocking law is that it protects us against, including on data transfers. If, for example, a foreign public authority, I'll take a concrete example, an American court or an American district attorney asks directly a French company as part of a litigation to transfer some data, including digital data. And the French company is alone facing the American public authorities with sanctions that could be extremely, extremely important. The blocking law is there to say you are not allowed to directly contact the French company, or the French company is not allowed to answer directly to the public authorities in the States. You have to go through international judicial cooperation. More of a blocking law, it's more of a reorientation law to compel the foreign public authorities to go through international judicial cooperation. And there it provides better protection in the quality of the data, for example, and especially in a world where in terms of judiciary, the proofs is more and more digital. 25 years ago, when I started with criminal law, the proof was some police people coming to seize the paper diaries, the paper folders. All this is over. Nowadays, the officers come, but they come directly, go and see the IT manager. They seize or make a copy of the server, and they copy millions of data, and then they process them. So the major difference and the major issue that is raised, especially to answer your question, is that from a judicial point of view, we've gone from paper proof to digital proof, and today the proof is totally digital. The judge is going to look at email exchanges, even WhatsApp exchanges, and so on. So the proof is totally digital. So just to talk about the two elements and to go further, first element, France is equipped with the SAPA law to go towards the international law, which is motivation to trigger those actions to fight against corruption, and gives an extra aspect for France to be sovereign on this aspect of fighting against corruption. And then there's this law for blocking or orientation to fight against the abusive right of the Americans in French companies. And then there are measures, as you said, starts of measures at European level. Well, yes, there has been in this movement in 2016, 2018, not just Alstom and Paribas were caught by the Americans, but also some German, Italian companies and so on. So there was a start of a mobilization, especially between France and Germany in 2018, 2019, to implement at European level some directives or a regulatory package against economic coercion. It was a major mobilizing in Germany because there were issues on Nord Stream 2. This pipeline connecting were used supposedly linking Russia to Germany, on which the Americans were putting pressure so that the Germans don't build it. So there was this mobilizing on the German side, but we must say that what happened last year, 2 years ago now, with the war in Ukraine, has completely reshuffled the card. So all European countries have realigned on the American side, especially all the sanctions where there could be some differences between Europe and the States. The Allied have realigned, and fighting against economic coercions have been put on the back burner or are, for the time being, put on standby. So here we're talking about e-evidence. Yeah, well, e-evidence is another matter altogether. That was adopted. There's a package that it is a directive and a regulation. It's sort of a response to the Cloud Act, to organize things to accept digital proof, to try and regulate all that, because all the extraterritorial aspects, China or the States, apply to the whole world, their laws. The best answer face to that is to apply the convention. So what we did for SAPANDO is exactly that. We implement legislation, we agree with the UK and the States to get coordinated. The best answer is that. Now, this is why we're talking about defensive or offensive. The best answer is that one. Now, if we can't do it, this is where I think we have to adopt some legislation or regulations with offensive objective to push the others to sit around the table and agree. And this is one of the proposals I made on the issues of the Cloud Act, was extend the proposal I talked about, our GDPR at European level to protect personal data, and it was to extend this protection to the data of the company. Well, thank you very much. Now, there are some extraterritorial practices that are questionable, that have increased over the last years. I'll just take one example. This is the case of the Chinese police, which are supposed to assist the members of the diaspora, according to several countries, European countries, to control these members and therefore disregard the local police authorities in the territories of residence. Now, this is a phenomenon that we've witnessed that shows the offensive of China. So it is a next step further in extraterritoriality. Here, we not only, the states, the foreign states, not only apply law to the whole world, but will send police people, investigators on the foreign territories to investigate and make their own legislation observe. All this, or at least on the French Republic territory, is totally prohibited. On whether you're French or foreign, the only law that applies on French territory is the one that is voted by the French Parliament, and those that require to execute it is under the police forces and the government and the courts, the French courts. And I don't have the offense in mind, but if there are some judicial investigations conducted directly on the French territory, I think that we could incriminate people to sanction that. And then, to come back to what we said, there could be international judicial cooperation. And of course, an American judge or a Chinese or Spanish judge who would like to investigate in France cannot do it directly, but should go through international judicial cooperation. It will be a French judge or French police who will, under the control or upon request from foreign authorities, question, investigate, and search. So I also wanted to have your opinion on certain digital practices of extraterritoriality that are slightly different. One, for example, is that of Estonia, who allows people who don't live on the territory to subscribe Estonian digital identities, to have a residence card, economic residence card, open a bank account. For some of them, even create companies and work totally remotely. That's a practice. And I'm thinking about Pakistan as well, who deliver specific ID cards for foreign residents, or for residents abroad, and cards for people who don't recognize fully as Pakistanis, but recognize the Pakistanis' origin. So this is a way of addressing the diaspora, encourage economic flows, and so on. So we can see these practices developing, especially on the basis of data or digital identity. How do you react to this? Well, I know that in Estonia, this is something the country, I think, is 98 or 99% has totally switched. It's totally paperless in the relationship with. So the next step is that there is we go into the global world and the attachment to the territory. So what the principle on which I've been living for 300 years is that the law applies from one state to a territory. And therefore, by switching to digital, you don't have this link. And these practices develop where people can acquire the nationality directly by applying digitally. So it is developing. You have they've implemented that as including to promote the attractiveness, economic attractiveness of the country. That's the objective, to promote attractiveness. There has been a number of hurdles because behind all this, it has created a kind of a bubble, and it's created issues with banks, especially in terms of money laundering. The company of the old digital and the absence of checks, and we saw that in previous forum, that even if many things are put into place with AI, you can develop clones and so on. The current legislation in terms of fighting against money laundering imposes to banks to check the identity and to see the person, or that the banker go and see the company's premises to actually see where there is an economic activity and so on, and there is no issues with money laundering. So I think the hurdle will come from that. Just to react to what you said, I think that 150,000 e-residents, which is little, but when you are a country like Estonia of 1 million inhabitants, that's 10% more than their inhabitants. So Pierre Salobir was saying this morning that the mayors said that there's no volunteer to manage polling stations, so it's important to go to digital voting. More than the majority of Estonians work online to the European elections. So is this, I understand that you have to promote international conventions, but wouldn't it be the interest of France to develop a policy of digital attractiveness based on a certain level of digital extraterritoriality for cultural programs, for citizenship programs, to animate its diaspora? Isn't there? I think, well, it is already being done. I mean, I can see, for example, the French citizens residing abroad. You know that they have their own MPs and senators in France. French citizens residing abroad vote digitally. And that dates back to, well, it's not that old. I mean, it is the reform of 2008 or 2009, but it does take part into that. And of course, there are more and more French people residing abroad. Therefore, that's what digital is all about, and remote voting help us keep the contact with the members of diaspora. Maybe the term is not appropriate, but with French citizens residing abroad. Now, that makes me think of France in the top 10 of what we call the soft power, a kind of an influence power. Using digital tools, could that contribute to that influence? Well, of course, yes, the soft power. It's connected to our history, our culture, that makes it that it's disseminated throughout the world. And of course, the digital tools accelerate and reinforce this soft power, clearly. Thank you very much. We're getting to the end of our time slot. We can take 5 minutes for questions. We can take a couple of questions. We have questions. Could you take a microphone to these people?
Allez-y, on vous entend. J'avais noté que lorsque une entreprise française ou européenne était sanctionnée par un juge américain, celui-ci pouvait imposer la présence le terme ne va pas forcément être le bon, mais d'un administrateur ou d'une personne pendant plusieurs années qui est capable.
Now, we have the possibility to link accounting ledgers of the company in question. That seems to me a little bit surprising. So has France developed measures to protect these companies in the case of this risk? Yes, absolutely. In terms of the problems of corruption, the decisions that are taken by the DOJ in the U.S., there is a sanction against the company, and then the company must show that for over the next 5 or 10 years, they have to put instruments in place in the company to make sure that practices of corruption can't be redeveloped. Now, the measure that we took, and I get back to the law Sapin 2, which set up new tools and which created what we call the French Agency for Anti-Corruption, is now we are imposing, and which is true for BNP Paribas, which was controlled by people that were charged by the American DOJ, the Department of Justice, or in the case of Airbus, where the decisions were taken by the French authorities, English or American authorities. It was imposed in the law Sapin 2 under the authority of the anti-corruption agency here in France, with auditors who or controllers or auditors who are usually expert accounting experts or lawyers sent under the jurisdiction of the anti-corruption agency here in France. So that's the answer. Final question, maybe? Thank you. I just want to react to what you said about Estonia, where the Estonians can vote remotely for municipal elections. I'm not convinced that that's the best solution for a country like France. Now, there's a connection, obviously, with this notion of external or remote voting for mayors or local authorities. We know that it's very complicated if you don't have a direct contact with the elected representatives and the community. So how can you reconcile maintaining this direct link with these remote databases that will or systems that will allow us to, for example, for the European system? I mean, if you look at departmental or regional or municipal elections, how do you see that? Well, it's a real debate. Even the assembly, the French assembly, went through this. What is the answer that we provide? We can see it over the last 10, 15 years, and even in the recent years, in the last few years. We can see maybe next June there is a very big increase of abstention. How are we going to respond on an individual level? And I think one of the answers will be to facilitate the right to vote and allow this remote voting. I think it's going to be complicated to have remote voting, for certain elections and not for others. I think that risks to be complicated. But I agree with you. In the context of the debate, the adversaries, or at least those who consider that one should not have electronic voting, they think like you do. They think it's important for citizens that this vote is, say on Sunday mornings, that only the citizens should go to the voting booths to vote. We might come back to that. I don't know. I mean, the president of the assembly posed the question of problems of proportional votes and things like that, and also on this question of remote voting. So it might come back into the debate. I don't think it's going to be a serene debate, especially now. I think it's a very passionate debate right now. So we might have an answer in a few months. We'll see. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Afagova. Thank you very much for your presentation. I ask you all to applaud.